Welcome to this Fundamentals Lesson Plan series on structural layout and design. In this video, we'll take a look at creating column grids. This is video 3 of 4. My name is John Harridge, and I'll be your host for today's lesson. Let's look at the learning objectives for video 3. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to create a rectangular column grid layout. Next, we'll take a look at creating a radial column grid as an addition to the rectangular column grid. And then we'll also take a look at modifying the column bubble locations by applying elbow joints to them. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin the exercise by opening up an existing file. Go ahead and click Open, and then browse out to your tutorial directory, and then go ahead and open up the structural exercise 3 project file. So grids are an annotation element. They are used to help organize your design, and what I mean by that is columns and beams can be hosted on column grids to create a parametric relationship, and Revit automatically numbers the column grids as you place them. And as you draw the grid lines, you have an opportunity to create parametric relationships between the grid lines or amongst the grid lines such that they work together in concert in a particular direction. So to begin, click on the Architectural tab, and we'll find and locate the grid tool off to the far right in the Datum panel. So that's where that is located. And I just want to confirm that the level 1 plan view is the current view. Let's go back over to the grid tool. Go ahead and select it. And we're going to use a line draw method. So in the draw panel, go ahead and pick up the line tool. And we want to start the column grid layout in the lower left corner of the project. So inside of the elevation markers in the lower left quadrant, go ahead and left click to place the tail end of the column grid at that location, and then drag your cursor straight up, and then left click to set the endpoint, which is also the column bubble itself, and it automatically numbers itself as number 1. Next, let's take a look at grid line controls. If we zoom in here to the endpoint or the tail end of the grid line, you'll see a circle, which is basically a grip handle to change the extents of the endpoint, and then there's a box grip outside that allows you to change whether it's a tail or a column bubble display. The same thing appears at the top at the grid bubble itself. And then there's one additional icon just below the grid label of 1, which is your add elbow icon. Let's go ahead and add grid line 2 immediately to the right of grid line 1. And let's do a hover, drag, and then enter in 30 feet as a direct distance entry. And then hit the enter key to accept. Drag the cursor straight up on the screen, and then let's acquire the alignment snap with grid line 1 to the left. Go ahead and left click to accept and create grid line 2. We'll go ahead and create 2 more grid lines. This time we'll use a different technique, so let's select modify to end that command. Go ahead and reselect grid line 2 on screen, and we'll use the copy method from the modify panel. So go ahead and select copy, move your cursor into the canvas, go ahead and click to set a base point, and then go ahead and enter in 30 feet again as the copy distance. Okay, so there's grid line 3. Let's repeat this. Go back to your copy command. Set a base point, drag your cursor to the right, go ahead and enter in 30 feet once again to create grid line 4. So that completes the grid line series in that direction. Let's go ahead and select modify to end the command. And then we'll create grid lines horizontally going from top down. But before we do that, let's go ahead and reposition the current grid lines just to center it a little bit better in the project. So create a window selection set, and then using your left mouse button, go ahead and drag and place the grids approximately at the center of the project visually. All right, so let's start the grid tool again. Now we want the bubble to be on the left side and the tail on the right hand side. So we need to actually begin the grid line on the right side, just right of grid line 4. So let's move our cursor over there. Left click to start the grid, and then left click just beyond grid line 1. Now, as best practice, you usually use numbers in one direction and letters in another. So in this case, we want to start the series with letters. So go ahead and left click the label and go ahead and type in the letter A, hit the enter key to accept. Let's go ahead and create 3 more grids below grid line A. This time we'll use a 20-foot offset. So hover and drag, and go ahead and enter in 20 feet as your offset distance. Then drag to the left, and again we want to acquire an alignment snap with grid line A above, just like we did similarly with the vertical grid lines. And then let's create 2 more grids, again 20 feet apart. Moving the cursor back over. Go ahead and establish the starting point for grid line C. Again, alignment snap. And then the last one is grid line D. Again, that's another 20 feet offset. And acquire that alignment snap with grid C above. All right, I'll select the modify tool to end the command. Note that the tails of the vertical grids do not cross grid line D, so I would like to correct that. We can do that simply by dragging the end grips. Note the padlock, and what that padlock means is that all 4 grid lines are going to work together. So you can select any one of those grids and then drag the tail end grip down and below grid line D to set its location. So this completes the primary part of the rectangular grid. The next step is to take a look at creating a copy of grid line 2 and creating a minor grid. So we'll select grid line 2 on screen and then use the copy tool to create a copy 3 foot to the right. And let's go ahead and change the label. Let's go ahead and set that to a label value of 2.1 and hit the enter key to accept. That gives it a label, and then we'll click on the add elbow icon to actually create an offset so it's not overlapping. And then you can use the drag handle to set its location. That looks pretty good. Next, we'll move on to creating radial grids just down and below the intersection of grid line D and 3. So go ahead and start the grid line tool. This time we'll use the center ends arc method. And we'll go in the options bar, go ahead and enable and mark the radius property, and go ahead and set that value to 15 feet. Place your cursor at the intersection of grids D and 3 and left click to set that as the center point, and then drag off to the lower left to acquire a 135-degree angle snap. Left click to start it there, and then acquire the counterpart 45-degree snap on the other side of grid 3 and left click to generate the radial. We'll create another radial, but we'll use a different technique this time. We'll use the pick line method to create an offset. So use pick line and then change the offset value to 15 feet. Move the cursor into the canvas window, hover over grid 2.2, and once that green preview line is appearing below it, go ahead and left click to create the second radial grid. Select the modify command to end the current creation command. Let's go ahead and relabel 2.2 to EE. So that's the first radial value, is E as an echo. And then let's go ahead and relabel the second radial, and let's give it the letters F as in Frank, so FF. Next, we'll extend grid line 3 to intersect the new radial lines. So we need to modify one of the properties of grid line 3 before we do that. Go ahead and select grid line 3, and you'll notice the padlock. We need to unlock the padlock so that grid line 3 can work independently of the other grids in that orientation. So left click to unlock the padlock. That makes grid line 3 independent. Go ahead and drag the shape handle and go below radial FF to set its endpoint. All right, and we'll also turn on the display for showing the column bubble at that location. All right, let's go ahead and select the grid line tool, and now we need to create the straight line radials. So pick up the line tool, set the start point at grid line D and 3, and then we want to acquire the 120-degree snap angle. And once you acquire the 120-degree snap angle, go ahead and left click to set the column bubble just beyond radial grid FF. So that completes that one. Let's go ahead and select modified and the command. And to create its counterpart on the other side of grid line 3, first we'll go ahead and relabel it to the value of 3.1. And to create its counterpart to the right of grid line 3, we'll use the mirror copy technique. So select grid line 3.1, and in the modify panel, go ahead and choose pick axis, and then left click on grid line 3 as your axis line, and it generates a copy and automatically labels it 3.2. Go ahead and hit the escape key twice to end the command. And let's continue by performing a zoom to fit so we can see the entire column grid relationship. This concludes the primary exercise. By default, column grids should appear in all plan and elevation views as I'm showing in the project browser. But I'd like to cover some finer points that are not included in the exercise that would be good to know. So let me begin by opening up the south elevation view to demonstrate what I mean. Note that the column grids automatically appear in the elevation views. And what I'd like to do is set up a situation where a level gets created after the grids have been created. So I'm going to make a copy of level 4 to create a new plan view of level 5. And I forgot to turn on the create plan view checkbox. So what I'll do is I'll go into the view tab and actually convert this reference level to a plan view so it actually shows up in project browser. So I'll go ahead and select level 5 and click OK, and now you'll see level 5 in Project Browser. But also note that the grids that we placed earlier don't appear in level 5, and so the answer to that question actually lies back in the elevation view. If we open up the south elevation view, note that the vertical part of the column grid line actually intersects and crosses through the level datum, and so that's the answer to that question. So to resolve this issue for level 5, simply drag the column bubbles such that the vertical part of that line actually crosses above the highest level. And now if I open up the level 5 plan view, those particular grid series now appear in the plan view. But what about the grid lines A through D? So we have to repeat that same process again in an adjacent elevation. So I opened up the east elevation view, and again, using the same method, dragging the column grids bubbles above level 5 will hopefully reestablish that in that view. So that's just a quick heads up on behaviors of column grids and views. So I'm going to delete level 5 now and take it back to where we left off before this instructor demo. Go ahead and select level 5 and hit the delete key, and I'll also have to delete it once again. Alright, I'm going to open up level 1 plan view as the active view and perform a zoom to fit. Alright, if you'll join me now, go ahead and perform a file save as, and let's give it the name structural exercise 3. This concludes this exercise. Let's go ahead and take a look at next steps. Let's review the learning objectives for video 3. In this lesson, you were able to create a rectangular column grid using the column grid layout tools, and then we added a radial column grid to the existing rectangular column grid, and then we learned how to change the location of the column bubbles by applying elbow joints. With that, let's take a look at Autodesk resources that are available to you. I would like to make you aware of 2 Autodesk resources. The first resource is the Autodesk Education Community, where you can access free software for both students and educators for titles like Autodesk Revit featured in this series. The website address is www.students.autodesk.com. Registration is required to access the free software using either your personal email address or your school-issued email address. The second resource is the Autodesk Digital STEAM Workshop. It's hands-on, project-based learning across multiple industries such as architecture, engineering, and entertainment. The website address is www.digitalsteam.autodesk.com. Registration is required to download the free learning resources using your Autodesk ID created from the Autodesk Education Community. You will find the Fundamentals of Architecture series under the Subject pull-down menu, Architecture link. Assets include step-by-step instructions, datasets, and videos. This concludes this lesson overview summary. Thank you for watching.